Okay, so going backwards, today is March 23rd. This is Patricia Price, and we're talking with the Ethiopia team. We're going to preview what it feels like to go from prototyping to pilot today. And we will get up, but we're really going to focus on the high-level view from a human-centered design perspective of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it at each phase as we go from round one prototyping and round two prototyping, sort of that rough prototyping to getting it into live prototyping, and then to a state of pilot and to scale. So that is what we'll focus on today. But given that this is sort of the whole, this all fits in within the human-centered design process, or the A360 process that sort of integrates all these different lenses, we wanted to sort of get a reminder of where we were. So we've done the phases of inception and inspiration, where we went out into the field. And the ideation phase is really where we're developing those concepts. And you guys have finished round one prototyping, you learned a lot, and now you're about to go into round two prototyping, where you'll get even tighter. And you can see that the rest of the phases follow from there. Prototyping round two will get you to know your concepts better for live prototyping, which then you will be more prepared for starting to scale and implement the solutions. So we are really focused on that set of the process today, but we can go back and talk about anything that you've been curious about, since I know it's been a long time since we've gotten a chance to check in with each other. This is sort of the broad strokes we wanted to do today. Wanted to just get a check-in from a learning perspective on how things were going, what you felt like you were learning, what questions you had as you go into these phases. And then we'll go through an actual preview of prototyping the pilot once we understand what people's, any other goals people have. And then there should be some time for QA and discussion. Is there anything else that you guys would want to cover today?
I think that it may be you can tell us more on how we can cascade this to the young designers and the area program managers, because they are not able to join us today. I know we are recording some of it, but maybe a tip from you on how we can better cascade it.
Great. And have Mary and the team from .org, have you already met some of the program managers, or will they be a newer audience throughout this whole program?
The young designers.
Sorry?
Program managers have been more along the process.
I heard you say that the program managers have been following along the process. Is that what you said?
Some more than others.
Okay. Okay. Excuse me. Some more than others. Okay. So let's make sure to address that. And that's a good point, because Metzahate, based on the conversations that we were having yesterday in the all partner meeting, and I know not the whole team was able to join that, it sounded like your team has a pretty good sense of what's happening, but I don't want to assume you know more than you do, or assume that you know less than you do. So are there any big questions going into prototyping to pilot that you also want to make sure we address today, or as the team is there in the field with you?
Come again, Trish, I didn't get one.
Sure. So in addition to thinking about how to cascade this to folks who are not on the core team, are there any other questions that the core team might have going into prototyping to pilot that we want to make sure we address either today or while the .org team is in the field with you?
Yeah, I'm sure your presentation will help us to figure it out, but I feel like the difference between round one, round and live prototype and pilots doesn't seem clear right from the beginning. For instance, like the first round, we get it right after we do it.
Right.
And same happens also now, like the second seems getting clear once we do it.
Right.
I know knowing it proactively might not be feasible, but for us, like, because we are getting close to the actual implementation, and we need to design an implementation modality. So we have to be clear on the distinction between the second round, the live prototype, and the pilots, and what kind of operational preparation is needed to make that happen. Because the first year and half of the second year is more of learning on the design, but we are now becoming design plus operation, which is a bit complicated and very difficult to articulate for the team in here. And we're kind of overstretching between the design objective and the operational aspect of it.
Okay.
And getting it clear on time, if it's possible ahead of time, will be very helpful to figure out those implementation modalities. And we're becoming in a way stressful and somehow, I don't know how to put it, but emotional.
Yeah.
That's why we're craving to more know about it before it's too late, so that we are on top of most of the things. Fine.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we definitely want to reduce the stress and try to anticipate what is possible to anticipate. And we know that this journey can be emotional, but as possible, we want to reduce the stress of it. And the team here will be able to help sort of move things forward in a way that will be more delightful, hopefully. But we know that you guys are accountable for certain things, and we want to make sure that all the teams are working together to meet those goals. So why don't this is a really good starting point. As you have more questions, are there any more questions before we jump into the content?
It's not a question, but I would like to share you what makes me happy this morning.
Okay.
We felt like the design team and the program team. So what I mean by the design team is IDEO, and the program team is the Ethiopia team.
Yeah.
We're kind of at different place in understanding the process, and also our expectation out of this second round prototype. And we did a 10 minutes exercise to brainstorm on what's our expectation and what kind of concerns we have, what questions and what challenges.
Perfect. Okay.
And surprisingly enough, we were on the same page and everybody was happy.
Awesome.
So regardless of those tensions and very tough discussions and decisions, we're having same brain, same mind, same heart, and that will really help us to achieve our goal. Those kind of inspiration for you, maybe for the people back in your office.
I think that's so good to hear. And I'm really grateful that you are comfortable and that the team is comfortable having these very open conversations, because it's not easy to do this work, and we know that. But as long as everybody is talking to each other and honest with each other, I think it will be very productive and fun. Well, that's good to hear. So knowing that you guys have had sort of a level setting conversation, Mary, we were originally thinking that we might do some reflections from a learning perspective, but we could just jump in. I know that learning has sort of been happening along the way, and we're sort of introducing more of these preview moments to make sure that you're getting enough advanced sort of preparation. Is there anything sort of before prototyping that anybody wants to reflect on that they may not have reflected on with Mary and the team before? And if I'm talking too fast, please tell me to slow down. So reflections to date, before anything that's happened before the prototyping phase, or maybe that happened after prototyping round one, that you're curious to, that was really sort of a big insight for you. Like Metzahe, you said that doing the work, actually, it became more clear. Was there a shift in how you had to work that that was surprising to anyone?
again, please.
Sorry?
Come again. The question.
Yes. So we are about to go into prototyping 2 and the rest of the phases, but just a moment to step backwards and look back at the prototyping round 1 and the synthesis process and the inspiration phase. Are there any, is there anything from that that anybody has any sort of big thoughts on, that this is a moment to sort of stop and think about before we jump into the next phases? Sort of what was either something that you might still be curious about, or something that was a really big surprise to you?
I don't know whether you are referring to the process or to the actual deliverable, which is at the content level. But in terms of the process, we realized that we are not documenting everything, and some of the things are kind of dropping off. And we set up a clear framework this morning on how we can better organize our documentation, and also trying to emphasize on the M&E and tracking aspect of it. I don't know whether the other team would like to add on that one, but these are some of the things that came up, even if we were not doing actual review or formal review the first round.
Yeah.
We've been like keep on saying idea iteration and iteration and iteration. Maybe my understanding, but I don't see like the link from the prototype 1 to where is the iteration is happening.
Yeah.
At the process. So you know, we tested so many things. We captured a few which are like palatable only for us. Last time even if there are small others, but probably if we captured everything and to leave it for us for further iteration, it might make some difference. So I'm trying to understand when it's going to happen, the iteration part of concept.
Great. And I think a short reflection on that, and we can talk about it more as we go deeper into the content, but that iteration, and Mary and the team can speak to this more, but you may have felt some of that iteration during prototyping round 1, between each day, or even between each hour. You may have felt things starting to change a little bit at a time, or a lot at a time. Certainly for prototyping round 2, as the team onboards to what they prepared, they can help explain what has changed. And as you go in the field, they will continue to work with you to help be clear about when things are changing and why they're changing. But you should certainly see the differences in the iteration that has happened between the last time they were there and this next trip very soon. Mary, would you add anything to that? Mary, I'm sorry to interrupt, but because we're recording, can you come closer to the speaker, please? I think you're cutting out. Okay. Thanks.
Is it going to be a circle? Is it going to be a square? Is it going to be a star? And we ended up not iterating as much in the field as maybe we talked about iteration, because we were casting such a wide net. We just wanted to figure out what is the shape of the thing we're making. What's the big idea? And next trip, we're now focusing on, okay, it's going to be married girls, and it's going to be something about health, and it's going to be something about finance. So this next trip, you'll see more iterations as we see, okay, is it going to be a triangle that looks like this, more of those areas. But what I would say is we're also doing, in this last trip, we're still doing iterations in each interview, because we would do a skit one way, see how people reacted, and then we'd do a skit a different way, and that's an iteration too. And we'd come back to the room and we'd say, tomorrow let's try it with, let's make the financial counseling be pre-marriage instead of at marriage. That's an iteration. And then the next day we said, let's try it at pre-marriage at HIV testing. That's an iteration. So every time our idea got a little bit better and a little bit stronger as we're hearing more feedback. On this trip, you'll be able to see all of the iterations more than this past trip where we were just in the interviews testing different things and there weren't clear artifacts or things that showed those iterations. Back to you, Trish.
Oh, can we not hear her?
All right. It's a funny thing how this interface works. So let us keep going. I was able to unmute myself now. Okay, so great. So hopefully you, again, this will be another time where when you're in the field, you'll feel things a lot more, and please do ask questions as you have them as you move the work forward, or maybe, you know, if or at the end of each day when you do your debriefs, you'll have that time to reflect on what was going on from a process perspective. I think that all of you are familiar with the basics of human-centered design. I included this in case there were new people on the call, but just really quickly, as you know, we are starting from what's desirable. We are starting to move towards what's feasible and viable from a solutions perspective, but we're always, always, always keeping the human and their desires at the center. We are moving in with the mindsets of creative confidence, empathy for our users, embracing the ambiguous space. So we may not know everything ahead, but we're starting to get to a place where we're resolving some of the ambiguity. We may surface new ambiguity, but working together and asking the right questions and trying new things out, you will move through that fog and come to clarity. You are starting to really build it. This is really in the next, you've got Adam there, you've got Mary, that you've got a whole team, Nicole, you've got a whole great team of folks who are expert builders. So please leverage them and use them. You've got people thinking about the problem set from different perspectives. You all know the program space very well, and you were building from your own perspective. So just as tangible as you can get quickly, you're really in the space for that now. You will learn from failure as you did in round 1, but you'll really see it in round 2 where you'll push it even more. And I think it was Tiggy who was saying, iterate, iterate, iterate. Again, that will become more clear. You're just going to do new things and try them out. You will test them out as quickly and often as possible. And we encourage you to stay optimistic as you did this morning, making sure that when you see a problem, you will have faith that you will have a solution if you work together. And with the methods, we know these are the big phases that we're using. We know that it can feel like a roller coaster. And we know that roller coaster follows these opening spaces and these convergent spaces. So while you are in the field, that rhythm will continue. You will open the ideas up. You will then start seeing what works and converge. And you will go through different cycles of this. You will try out lots of different ways to get there. And the team will lead you through that. Okay. At a high level, we wanted to review what prototyping was. Prototyping is really about bringing the ideas to life quickly and by making the ideas tangible so that you can get feedback as often as possible and continue to improve the concept and get your solutions out into the world faster. And this is the basic rhythm we talk about, where we first figure out what is the question that we want to answer. and come up with a plan for how we want to answer it. Then we build the concepts to test them out and get feedback from real users, or even from each other if it's very quick. But we always want to get feedback from users as soon as we're ready for that. And then we integrate the feedback and we build again. And we say, what's the next question we're going to ask? And this is the cycle. You go over and over again to get your ideas into the world. So as we talk about each phase, we will always keep these ideas in mind. The questions may start to change. The fidelity or how close to the final solution of the build, those things will change. But you will get closer and closer to finding the right answers. Yes?
An example from today is we were starting to outline some of our questions, and some of the questions were really, really detailed. And first we want to answer the biggest questions, our biggest assumptions with our first test when we're in the field. And then if we answer those questions, then we're going to narrow down and start asking more detailed questions. So once we know that financial counseling is a good way to introduce the family planning conversation, then we'll start answering questions like, do they want to have counseling do they want both counseling sessions at the same time, or do they want a referral to another session? And so we'll start answering those more detailed questions once we've answered the big questions.
Great. Does that make sense, that we ask these sort of bigger questions first and then we'll get down to the details?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. One thing we wanted to bring up was, sometimes it's really easy. You went and you did inspiration, and many times people want to go directly from the thing they saw and then just solve the problem. And in many cases that can be fine. But when we are solving these big problems, we need to abstract a little bit. So just like you did synthesis for inspiration, you will be synthesizing everything you learn on a daily basis and then at a broader basis. So why we do that is we are, instead of just going from a one-to-one observation to a solution and the first idea you have in mind, we're going to think about what we saw and what that meant for the deeper needs and desires of the people we're trying to help. And is there a bigger opportunity, like Mary was talking about, what's the bigger space that need lives in? And then we start asking questions that open up that space a little bit. We often frame them as the how might we questions we've talked about, and this will continue on even in prototyping and pilot. So if you discover one thing about the communities you're serving, about married girls, it might lead you to a new sort of more specific question, a new hypothesis, and then figuring out what are the sort of quick ways to test those hypotheses. And when you ask questions and try to answer them in more than one way, you get more ideas. And so that abstraction is really important to help you get to better concrete answers. And you may not the better solution may not be the first one you came up with. So we do not just do the synthesis right after inspiration. We are constantly synthesizing and abstracting and making sense of what is working and what is not. So just wanted to reinforce that you're always asking not only what is working, but why it's working. Any questions about this?
I think
Can you come closer to the microphone, please?
Yeah. Wrote out your questions and your goals in frameworks, and you're already synthesizing the information that we know so far, and you're starting to create models that make the information we know more meaningful. So the journey that you showed of the main goal is delaying childbirth, and then the next goal is facing childbirth. That's a nice way where you're taking the skills that we learned in synthesis and inspiration, and you're applying it to prototype.
Great. Thank you. And it'll go faster than the original synthesis process, but you definitely want to make sure you're doing that. Okay. Okay, so let's jump in. What does it mean to go from this rough space to refined space? This is, oh, yes. Yep.
Can you go back to your previous slide?
Certainly. This one?
Yep.
Okay.
I wonder, how does this looks like in light of our recent conversation that's mainly was focusing on narrowing down?
Yes.
Can you make it like, I would like to understand it example, because I get things easily. Somebody else example.
Yes. So I put this sort of roller coaster back up, and you can see that at the beginning in inspiration, we were very, very open, right? We explored a lot of spaces, or you all explored a lot of spaces, and then you started to converge on the big opportunities. You can't see my arrow, but you can see how it starts to come down. And then into ideation, you started to open it up again. So you can imagine maybe there's more than a few ups and downs here. But in ideation, you open it back up again to say, well, how can we start addressing? How might we start addressing some of these opportunities? And you come up with lots of ideas. Excuse me. And then you use them in prototyping round one to start to see where you could really focus and what really had promise. And so then you started to narrow, right? So that was a narrowing time. So pretty much at every phase, we're opening it up a little bit and then closing it a little bit. And there's a sort of up and down process. But as you can see with this roller coaster, it starts to go down a little bit more, right? You open it up, you close it a little bit, and then you start honing in on where you really want to, what's really going to work and and then once you get towards the later stages of implementation and ideation, you're looking about how is it really going to work? And we can jump into that in more detail. But like this picture, you're starting with big spaces and you're getting to smaller and smaller spaces, but you still want to make sure you're going through these feedback loops and these iteration loops. Does that make sense? Or maybe it will make even more sense as we talk about the different phases.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do that, and then let's make sure we address this, because this is the most important thing. I know it can feel, it can create anxiety when you think you're always opening things up, and sometimes it will feel like you reopen things up because you may discover something through prototyping that hadn't come up before. And so you have to figure out what to do with that information. This is a slide that we had from Melissa about how the different rounds were being described. Metzahate and the team, have you seen this slide before?
I have seen it.
Okay. And so we are going from round one with lots of rough ideas, experimental concepts, more insights, checking in to see how things have changed with the report card, going into where you are for round two, where you're getting maybe less ideas, but you're getting more specific about them, or wherever your team is in this journey, and getting a little bit more realistic as you move forward with the execution, and figuring out what are the pieces of a system that might be starting to emerge. And again, at the end of it, checking in and seeing what you learned. Live prototyping, we'll go into this in a little bit depth, but at a high level, it's for seeing how these pieces start to fit together as a real system and really testing the system of that, that will happen in live prototyping. Whereas right now you will be focusing a lot more on what are the pieces like and what's going to be desirable. And you're in live prototyping, you're going to start to build that into the real world and start modeling that. And again, you'll have a chance to sort of say, what did we learn? And you're going to have some new pieces to work through, which is the costing model. And I think PSI is working on making sure you have some support there. And I think that there's elements of that I think that Gifty is also helping with. And so, so Courtney, you working with PSI to make sure, and with Metzahate's team to make sure that that you know how you're approaching costing. And then with piloting, by this time it should be really refined system solution, and we're going to get to test the cost assumptions in greater detail, and then prepare that for rolling out in a scaled up plan. My understanding is that this is still a conversation about what that scale up looks like. My goal today is not to answer all the details of those questions. Those are going to be worked through between the Ethiopia team and Mary and Melissa. And Katie and Jessa, I think, are having conversations with Melissa about what scale looks like. And I think, Metzahate, you brought up some of those questions. So I can talk about that, but I won't have those answers today.
Hi, please, can I ask one silly question?
Yes.
What makes a live prototype live? Why is it called live?
This is very good. I will tell you this. So that's what Melissa sort of put on the table. What I wanted to do today was really show you what that looks and feels like from a human-centered design perspective. And so Adam will know this story much more closely, so please correct me if I get any of the details wrong. But when we're looking, we are always sort of learning to launch. So what can be different about human-centered design from other development processes is that we are constantly learning, and we don't just come up with an idea and then scale it immediately. We are always testing and then sort of rolling things out to bigger and bigger audiences as we're able to. So the beginning part is really design-led, but we're always taking into account the operations. And the number of ideas at the beginning is quite big, but then the more we go along the process, those ideas start to slim down. But we're starting at small units, and that can be sites, that can be number of people. In healthcare, when I was working in healthcare before, I always thought about the patient as the unit, as the primary unit, but that can really change depending on what your solutions need to serve. And so we keep these really low, actually, throughout the process until we're ready to start going up to a little bit bigger in pilot, but you don't want to go much bigger than 1 to 3 spaces or sites. And then you can start to create a phased rollout plan, but you wouldn't necessarily want to go so big right from the beginning. What you're seeing here is the evolution from a photography perspective. What you're seeing here is the evolution of a product that Adam helped design, or maybe just did all the design for, which is called the D-Light lamp. And you can see, we're going to go through each of them, but you can see how they start really rough and then get more and more real. But you're still trying and testing different variations, even at different spots. And then until you have the thing that's tight enough and cost efficient enough to start spreading and scaling. The things that you might be testing at rough prototyping may change over time until for what you actually scale. So these are some cute icons that Katie came up with. So maybe at the beginning it's about services and some book tools or pamphlets or provider sets. And then maybe as you learn, it sort of changes. And maybe, I think the sheep is there to represent, like, maybe it's about giving people jobs. And at the beginning, you're looking really at the components, but you're always in the back of your mind, you're thinking, is this part of a greater system? As you get to live prototyping, you need to actually start codifying that system and making sure that's something, excuse me, that you can move forward. And as you're entering spread and scale, your system will not vary that much between your pilot and your spread and scale usually, but it will be tighter, more refined, and more cost efficient. All right. Any questions before we go into each of the phases at sort of a high level? Okay. So what's happening in each phase? In the rough prototyping, which is, and I would say prototyping round 2 is really sort of a build on prototyping round 1. You will get a little bit more tight on on how high fidelity you're getting, but you can still think of it as a low-fi to mid-fi, a low to medium fidelity range. You happen to have really great designers in the field with you, so your fidelity will be better than most. The purpose is to confirm the initial design opportunities from formative research and identify the most compelling concepts to explore more deeply. Your mindset here should be exploratory. So in round 1, you were really more exploratory. You'll stay exploratory, but you're going to evolve what you learned more. So your mindset now will be more evolving, but staying open to what you might learn. The question you want to ask here is, did we find promising concepts to address needs we identified in inspiration? And you will start with maybe a big set of ideas in round 1, and then you will, by the end of this, you should feel like you have a more focused set of concepts. When you talk about what is design doing and what is operations doing, those can be very specific to each team. But in this process, a lot of what operations is doing is opening up the doors so you can actually start testing in real context with real people. So it may be about recruiting the sites and the participants that you can test with. It may be about helping us understand what is available, which partners you might want to be working with. And in round 2, you first, most certainly will be thinking about who are the partners we can start engaging to learn from, to see if there's benefit in working with them. Is there anything else the team might be thinking about now between design and operations that would be helpful to think about? Oh, and you might be thinking about local partners, local design partners to start playing with. Mary or Adam, would you add anything about this rough prototyping stage? And may you speak into the mic, please?
No, I heard you mentioning whether we do have a local design partner or not. Is that your question?
Yes, you may think about that or start exploring who. You can also start doing that during live prototyping, but it's, if you start to know, the more you know in advance, the more you can try out and experiment with. Adam, can you speak into the mic, please?
I was just adding that everything accelerates at this phase because we're building more and more constraints and we're learning more and more about what we're working on, who we're working with, where, and all of that. Mm-hmm. And it gets less, it always gets less confusing and more real, more tangible.
Yeah.
From now on.
Yeah. Was there another statement? Sorry, can you repeat that into the mic? Sorry.
It's okay. I was just saying, like, metaphor for it is what Adam said about how much faster it moves. It's like putting together a puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes a while to get the frame of the puzzle done and some of the key pieces done, but once you have that done, it moves really, really quickly to fit everything together.
Cool. I think that's a really nice way to frame it. You can see.
T, I think had a question.
Oh yeah, T. What's your question?
When is like the time for us to take back our prototype with the original finding on the inside?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I heard it right.
When is the time we're taking ourselves, our prototype,
Yep.
with the original finding from the formative research?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that happens. The first one is, I think it's always useful to keep your original sort of driving insights somewhere where you can see them, so you can remember what sort of drove you originally. And number two, you may learn new things. So it may just give you a nuanced, more nuance or more detail into what your original insight gave you. I think sort of on a day-to-day basis, you can sort of make those connections. And at the end of each phase for the report card, you will be reflecting and making those connections as well. Mary, do you have anything to add about how you have been running those connection points, or how you'd like to run them?
Yeah. Deck is the end deliverable. The end deliverable is what we're piloting and implementing. So the insight deck is helping us get the pilot and implementation. So I've done projects before where through prototyping, we are confirming or building on insights. And then actually at the end of the project, we update the insight deck based on what we learned through prototyping. And so it's the insight document is the first step. And we should continue to refer back to it, but we are not held accountable to what that insight deck says for how we implement the end solution, because prototyping is just, the biggest goal of prototyping is to learn how to change behavior. And so you can still change and shift those insights. Like, for instance, I bet the way you explain the insights now may be different than how you explained them in December, because we've learned different nuances of the insights through the first round of prototyping.
And it's not unusual for the prototyping, to Mary's point, to give you new insights, right? Because it is a learning process, you may learn new things that you want to capture that are actually more interesting than the first insights you may have had.
Yeah, I remember Mania was saying in one of the conversations, like, insights have shelf lives.
Yeah, exactly. That's nice.
So it means like kind of a live document. And it's in a way a vehicle for us to come up with the solutions. And I think that makes it a bit different from the research findings.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why we call it usually, it's an outcome of a design research instead of a contemporary or usual type of research.
Yes. Yep. That's right. Okay. So rough prototyping, you'll stay exploratory, but as Adam says, it's going to start to get real clear. What you're doing is, and I want you to sort of know this going into it, but I want you to then forget a little bit about live prototyping and piloting and scale, and just think about being in the rough prototyping stage, because it's really important that you sort of give each phase its space. So for live prototyping, what's different is you're continuing to think about what's going to be desirable as a solution set, but you're also starting to focus a little bit more on what's going to make it work. You are starting to do that in rough prototyping. You'll see that you're always thinking about what's desirable, what's feasible, and what's viable, but you're really making sure that you answer the questions of each phase and giving it its space. So for rough prototyping, really make sure the thing is desirable before you move forward. For live prototyping, now that you know what's desirable, let's see how it's going to really work in the world. And what's different here, you may be doing a little bit of live prototyping accidentally during this rough prototyping time, but we wanted to create a phase where it was really about trying your ideas out and trying to get an uptake in services. And that's what the focus for live prototyping will be. You might be doing some of that accidentally or serendipitously during rough prototyping, but you will absolutely be doing it during live prototyping. So one of the main mindsets here is to validate what you learned in rough prototyping. You will move things very far in rough prototyping. You will validate this in live prototyping. You will start to make connections between not just which components have a lot of promise, but how those things work as a system. So you should be already sort of having that in the back of your mind, but for live prototyping, you're going to set up those systems, or you're going to set up the prototypes in a more systemic way. You're going to see if the solution is working. You're going to make sure it's still desirable, and if you're able to run it. You're going to come in with these focused concepts, and you're going to come out of that phase with a system solution. I think you're starting late May, so it may be more responsible to say this is happening in June. Is that right? Excuse me.
Hey, Trish.
Yeah.
So,
Can you speak into the mic?
Kim here needs to go because it's 6 o'clock.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but maybe if we just really on a high level,
Yeah.
the question earlier, what's the biggest difference between live prototyping and rough prototyping? And then pilot.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do this fast. I'll just go straight to this one. For the biggest difference between rough prototyping and live prototyping is that you're going from, here, I'll just kind of cut through to the summary slide. For rough prototyping, you're focused on desirability. Live prototyping, you're thinking about desirability and feasibility. Pilot, you're thinking about those desirability, feasibility, and really making sure it's viable. It's going to really work. And then spread and scale, you're thinking about scalability. What that means is the ideas can still be a little bit loose and rough here. By round 2, you're really going to push it forward and evolve the ideas. In live prototyping, you're validating them. And you're starting to make sure services actually can be done. Like we're actually making the behaviors change that we want to see change. And we're doing it on a consistent basis. For pilot, we are taking what we learned in live prototyping and we're really adapting and refining. We're getting tight about how this thing is going to work so that for spread and to scale, we have a phased plan to really optimize as we move forward. Your questions are different. sorry, I'm conscious of the time, but the big questions are, they're sort of moving forward in that space where you're going from what's going to work, what's promising, is it going to work in live prototyping, and are we going to be able to run it, which is the big question. And you're starting to, from an operations perspective for live prototyping, you're starting to set up, by live prototyping, you have figured out which resources you can test with, so that for pilot, you're actually hiring some people. For rough prototyping, you may be using your existing resources to experiment with new roles, or you may already have people lined up to serve those. But by live prototyping and pilot, you are already creating space for people to do new services in a different way. Again, for live prototyping, you're starting to make the system clear. And for pilot, you are moving from being able to articulate what the system is to actually being able to make it reproducible in preparation for spread and scale. You will, I don't know, I mean, you can read this. Do you have any questions? I know I'm going fast. Sorry that we started a little late, and I don't know if you have 10 minutes more, but sorry, I went through that really fast, much faster than is probably helpful. Do you want to take a moment to just read what is on the screen and see if you have any questions about it? As you go ahead, yes.
And also, why don't we have some kind of session in between, waiting till June?
What's that?
But today is like, it's a very tense schedule, like we have to go and prepare for the trip, and it's already good.
Yeah, so why don't we wrap up here? But Metzahate, I want to be available to you as helpful. Mary and Adam are in the field. They can also, and the whole team can answer lots of questions, Katie. You've got a really great set of folks who think about these spaces from different levels. And my goal here was just to introduce the idea that each of these phases exists to help you refine the idea, so that you don't just have to go from the idea to something operationable, right? That you're moving through this to sort of, in sort of a guarded way to be able to do this. So this will all make more sense as you go in. But please collect any questions we might not have been able to answer here. For example, when we talk about how to cascade this to the area program managers, I think bringing them into the process will be really helpful. Bringing them in through rough prototyping to sort of get a sense of what's coming is going to be useful. And then creating space to prepare them for who's going to be doing live prototyping and what resources you're going to need. You won't know some of that till you've done more of the prototyping in this round. But if there are moments to bring them in to sort of peek at what's happening and start to understand what questions they have or get feedback from them, that might be really useful. And the other big question, so those are some, I think we tried to address the big questions. Iteration is happening all the time in different ways. And I know you have a big day, so I'll stop talking and just make myself available to you guys as needed. Any other thoughts before we close for today?
Thank you so much.
Sure, and I can send you the PDF of this so that you can sort of keep it in the back of your head. But again, Melissa, Katie, and Mary will be able to sort of tell you more about the details about what each deliverable will need to be for this program. And this is meant to just give you a high-level view for what you can use for all programs that you do this with. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much, and wish you to feel better soon.
Thank you. You guys too. Take care. Have fun and learn a lot.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.